Hello everyone, my name's Hannah Collison from Inspired Creations Surrey School of Sugarcraft, and here is the video tutorial for my sweet pea in sugar. Here is an image of the sweet pea. We're going to be making one main flower and some foliage, and I'll show you how to put it together as well. If you'd like to join in with the session, then here is what you'll need. And if you've got any questions, then please feel free to get in touch by phone or email. The details are on this business card. So let's get going. So here we have the cutters, and I think I've checked with most of you to see which one you've got. Just to remind you, if you've got the small ones with the M, you're making quick sweet pea, and you can make maybe 3 centres. If you're using the more technical set, which looks like a kidney, the smaller cutter looks like a kidney, then just make 1 centre or 2, have 1 spare, all right? Because it will take you the lesson to create the piece. And don't worry if you're struggling a little bit with your paste. It is quite hot today, so that can have a bearing on its stickiness. And also, I'm here if you've got problems with taping or anything like that. So yeah, here we go. So the first thing I want to create, and this is for both different types of cutter, is what looks like a Cornish pasty. So it's got a sharp ridge up one centre, one side. This is flat. It's actually got a line indent in there, which I'll show you how to do. It's not coming out that clear, but it's got a line indent, like a coffee bean, okay? And it's plump in the centre, more flat and pointed at both ends. Now, this is actually the seed pod, and the seed pod holds everything together. It sits in the center here with the flat end towards the back petal, or if you're making the small flower, it's actually what the inner petals attach to. Okay, so that piece is what we're going to make first in our white paste. And I'm just using Squire's Kitchen. I did try working with it last night, and even though it's a quick drying paste, because there was a bit of humidity in the air, it was a little bit sticky, but hopefully it's all right today. And all you need to do is maybe add a little bit of corn flour to your hands before you work with it. So if you haven't worked with this before, you just want to make sure that you stretch it and twist it to warm it up. You can see it sticking to my fingers a little bit. So I'm just going to take a little bit of corn flour on. I don't want to incorporate too much because we don't want to dry the paste out and make it crumbly. So my ball of paste for the big cutter, so the one that looks like a kidney shape, this comes with it there. Let's put these back for a minute. That one, the big cutter, is going to be 1 centimetre. The idea is when you create your middle, it's actually only going to be about just over 1/3 of the height of the cutter. So this one here, the small cutter set, if you're making one for here, you actually only want to make it so that it fits within here to here. So that's how you're going to size guide the small one. The small one you will need less than 1/2 centimetre diameter, okay, and this is less than 1 centimetre just. So the process is the same for both, just the size difference. Roll it into a ball. So you've got to put, sorry, into a ball and then into a cone. The pointed end is then going to be inserted into a 26 gauge wire. And that's because we need some strength to the flower. Now you can bend a hook in the end of this if you want to. You might find it a bit tricky with the thicker wires, the 26 or the 24 you might have. If you're making the small one, you need to work with a 28 gauge wire, and that you can put a hook in. So I'll just show you the prep for that. Okay, so if you're working with the M-shaped cutter, then you're going to put a hook in a 28 gauge. And if you're working with the larger set or the 2 separate petals, then you need a 26 or a 24. So I'm just going to put a hook in there so you can see. All right. Then I don't think you're going to need any glue, but if you feel like the paste is very dry, you can actually add a little bit of glue to the hook. And then we're going to push the hook into the pointy end. See, so that gets pushed on. Looks a little bit like a giant matchstick or cotton wool bud. I'm just pressing it between my fingers to make sure that that's secure. And then I'm just going to pinch out a little bit of a point, not a big point, just a little bit of a point at the top there. Okay. Position your finger on one side that's going to be the back, the straight side, and then between your other finger and thumb, pinch out a ridge. And this is making it look a little bit like a Cornish pasty. So we press right up to the top because I want it to be a little bit pointed. Ah, here's Joyce. We'll just let Joyce in. Okay. So that's my nice ridge. And then I want to narrow this just a little bit. I want to keep it fat in the middle, slim on the sides, and pointed on the sides. Okay, so that's the little seed pod. Now I'll show that again in a minute, but the process is the same for both the big one and the small one. If you want, although it doesn't show that much, you can actually use your veining tool or a cutting wheel and just press in an indentation on the straight back side. That's where in real life the seed pod would snap open and out would come all the seeds once the flower's finished its job. Okay, so that is your little seed pod. So if you're working with this set of cutters, you can make one and possibly one spare. With this set of cutters, you can make about 3 because they're quite quick to make. Okay, so feel free to unmute yourself to ask any questions, and we'll check as well if we'll make sure to hold off for a moment until I've done this bit. Okay, just looking for my paste, but it's under my thigh. So I'm using the Squire's paste, and I'm just going to make one of the small ones for those who've got the small cutter. And depending on how much you need, your size guide, your seed pod, see that looks ginormous for that cutter. So your seed pod is going to sit with the guide of that as the length of it. Okay. So having a look at that, I need to think to myself, well, I probably only need a pip-sized ball of paste, which is actually about 1/2 centimetre, not even that. Warmed up nicely into a ball, into a cone shape. And then I've got a little hook in my 28 gauge wire. If you feel you need to use glue, then do, but that will get pushed into the pointy end. And we'll just close up the pointy end so it looks a little bit like a matchstick or a cotton wool bud. I'm just putting some corn flour on my fingers because they're feeling a little bit sticky. And then we just take the tip of it between our finger and thumb and just pinch it a little bit. I don't want a huge point, but I just want to get it to some kind of point rather than rounded. Okay. Hold your finger to one side, which will become the back and flat. And then between your finger and thumb, a little bit more fiddly, this one, because it's smaller, we're just going to press a ridge around the top here. So we've got a sharp bit there and a flat bit here. If you give me one moment, because I've realized I haven't plugged my computer in. That's not going to help if I suddenly disappear on you. So let's get the power in here. There we go. Of course, like panic. All right. So once you've created your sharp ridge here, just have a look at it from the top. Press here and here to narrow it slightly. So you've got a fat belly, sharp edge. And this bit here, if it's a little bit too long, you can just use your nails to pinch in and pull any excess off. So when I test that now with my M-shaped cutter, whatever size M-shaped cutter you've got, that should fit within this bit here. Okay, otherwise it's going to look too big. Has anyone got any questions?
Just one, Hannah.
Hi, Taryn.
I'm trying to, I keep feeling like there's a gap at the bottom where I'm, where you're trying to get it on the wire. It looks a little gappy.
Yeah, when it's like the pinching process that can be a bit frustrating, can't it? Because it looks open. So I find rather than trying to twiddle this on, which sometimes if you do this movement, it tends to open it out rather than close. So I'm just use my finger and thumb and press it on, a proper pinch. If you then end up with like a excess that doesn't look very pretty, once you have got it on, you can use your fingernails just to pinch the base and pull off.
Thank you.
Yeah, try that.
Thanks.
Hannah, I've got a question.
Hello.
Hello, it's Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
You asked to see my cutters at the beginning and I wasn't ready because my internet wasn't working properly, but this is what I've got. Can you see them?
Just put them up by your face. Oh yeah, lovely. Okay.
I didn't hear what size, which one am I doing the size on and how much should it be?
That's all right. No, that's fine. I'll show you. Thanks for showing those.
Okay.
Okay, so you've got a larger version of this set. Okay?
Yeah.
So the bit that's that you're going to use is
between there and
the M-shaped one. That's going to be used as your size guide.
Yeah.
Okay, so which one to do first? I'm actually going to show you the more complicated back first, and that way those who have this cutter set can crack on, or if you've got a large version of this, you can crack on. If you've got a small version of this, you can actually do it all in one. So once I've shown this one, I will show you how to do the all-in-one quick sweet pea. So this cutter here, we need to have a ridged board for. Now, it's very possible you haven't got a ridged board, you've just got a board that's flat, or maybe you haven't even discovered that on one side it's flat and on the other side it's got these ridges. If you haven't got a ridged board, I'll check that in a minute. I can show you how to create the ridge without this board. Okay, so don't be concerned if it's still all doable. So what I'm going to do is take some paste, probably just over 2 centimeters worth. So I've got enough to roll out to cope with this wide shape. Okay, so give it a good warm up. And if you've got this cutter set, you'll only be making one of these. Okay, but it's the big one. So a little bit of corn flour, because again, it is feeling super sticky. It is important to warm up your paste before you start, because by stretching, it activates the gum, and that's really important because that's what gives you the strength. So again, a bit more corn flour because it's super hot this morning. And to start with, I'm just going to roll across that groove to get the rough width. And that way I know that when I go lengthways to get the height of the cutter, I'm okay for space. It's going to fit the cutter. So I'm rolling super thin. And that's really important, because otherwise, if your petal, because it's big, it's going to be very difficult. It'll swing on the wire, you'll have trouble thinning. So it's better to make it super thin. And you can tell it's thin because I can see the thickness of the paste where the ridge is. But either side, I can see the colour of the board coming through. And that's my key indicator that it's thin enough. So a little bit of corn flour on there. And I must pull this off now. Very carefully. You might find, again, it might stick. And I'm going to turn it over. And the reason for that is because I don't want it stuck on my board when I cut my shape, because it will distort. And by turning it over, I can see the ridge, but also I've got the drier side face down, which actually gives you a crisper cut. So because this is quite sticky, I need to just put a bit of corn flour on the surface of the paste and then line up my cutter so that this funny little end here is on the fattest part. I'm going to press down and rub. I can re-talk you through this in a little while. So if the demo is it's not a long demo, but if it is long for you, then I will remind you what you're doing. So while it's in the cutter, that's an advantage. You can gently rub your finger around the outside edge and just drop the shape out. The running finger around the edge bit is to help with any furry bits. Okay, so that gives us our shape. And I'm just going to put my paste under cover just so that it doesn't dry out. That's the excess paste. And then we have a 28 gauge wire that's got to go in. So I've cut these into 3 and I've kept it super straight. It's really important that your wires are straight when you do this. If you haven't threaded paste before, it can be a little bit of a challenge. You might have to do 1 or 2 shapes before you get this technique. And it's the key thing when you're making sugar flowers is to know how to successfully wire. So it's worth persevering, because once you know how to do this and how to tape, you can make all types of flowers. So I've got my ridge placed on my finger and my wire held in my writing hand, okay, and quite close. So I'm not up here because that will bend the wire as it goes in. I'm quite low down. And we're just going to put a bit of pinching pressure between my finger and thumb to force the wire to be right in the center of that ridge. And as I feed the wire through, I've got my finger and thumb, top and bottom, pinching exactly where the end of the wire is. So it stops it from coming out. We keep going all the way until you reach about here. Okay, so we're about 3 mil away from the end, and that's so that we can keep the, well, you're supporting the paste because you don't want to hit it, knock it and something break. If you've only wired it to here and you catch it as you're putting it together, then half your petal might fall off. This way, hopefully, it'll be a bit more robust. So then I'm going to bring my poppy veiner in, and if you haven't got one of these, it doesn't matter, I can show you another way. Poppy veiner, this is PP, is facing me. If I've got this the right way up, then this side is the back. And my ridge, because it doesn't look as pretty, it's always going to be on the back. So the ridge goes face down onto this bottom part of the veiner. Put it in the middle, a little bit of corn flour. And then I'm going to close it up. The corn flour so that you can peel it back off again. So press down firm and release again. What I'm not doing is this, because what will happen is your wire will react to that and go a bit zigzaggy. This way, that just a flat press is giving you a chance to keep that wire nice and straight still. So I've now got my texture on there. Okay, that's the ridge at the back. So this is the back. And I'm going to just keep it face up, so I want the front, and drop that onto the side of my board and a little bit of corn flour. And I'm now going to use a cocktail stick, or, and this wasn't on the list, but if you've got something like this, it's a silk veining tool. It's got texture on one end. If you might identify, it's got smile on the other. So if you've got this one, it's an alternative to a cocktail stick, or you can use a kebab stick. If you're using a cocktail stick or a kebab stick, you need to just take a little bit off the end so that you haven't got a big point, a long point. And if you notice on my cocktail stick, it tapers. So you've got to the point, you've got this narrow, 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 and then all of a sudden it gets to its fattest point and then it carries on being fat. So the technique we're going to do with the cocktail stick, this part where it turns fat has got to be rested on the edge of your paste. So your tool is not right on, okay? The same with this. I wouldn't go on more than 1 centimetre with this one. So we drop that onto the paste and you start to roll backwards and forwards. So the best way of doing this is to drop the cocktail stick with the fattest bit on the edge here, and then you press down with your fingers and you roll backwards and forwards, okay? And the idea is that you're going to start to frill, so you're stretching the paste, and because you're stretching the paste, it's giving you this ruffly frill all the way around the outside. And you'll notice all I'm doing is moving the shape. I'm keeping the cocktail stick in a very similar position, just lifting it a little bit. You can see what's happening now. Okay, it's starting to frill. You know you've got your wire here, so you just need to be a little bit careful coming across so you don't catch your wire, and then you can go again on the other side. So I normally start from the center here. Now I'll just finish this for you, and again, when you get to it, if this technique's not working for you, then I'll watch what you're doing. I've just got 2 more things to show you on here, and then I'll let you loose and have a go. So you can be quite brutal with this paste. We'll have to have a look at that air drying clay from Aldi, and I'd be very interested to see how that is, because I don't know how much it is, but if they're selling it in Aldi, then that might be quite a good thing. I have got a handout on non-fired porcelain as well, so I can email that out to you if you find that would be useful. So now I've got my frill all the way around. It's still looking a little bit flat, so I need to do a bit of shaping. But before I do that, I'm just going to turn my veiner over to the back side so there's no texture showing. Because it's a little bit spongy, it will enable me to just press down a little bit without cutting through. So I've got my sharp end of my Dresden veining tool, or you could use a cocktail stick to draw this line, or a cutting wheel, but very lightly so that you don't cut through to the wire. I'm just drawing a central line. Take your finger and thumb front and back in the middle of the wire, not at the end here, and bend it back a little bit. Okay. And now I'm just going to flare open. So just by this kind of, I tried to describe this movement yesterday and I wasn't very clear, I don't think, but the idea is that you kind of move your finger and thumb. So the thumb is on one part and the finger's on another, and that kind of waves, makes it wavy. And what you're doing, because when you've frilled with the cocktail stick, it's kind of giving you that tight frill. This is opening up the frill a little bit to give it movement. And the very last bit is down here. At the moment, that's dead flat. But I want to be able to sit my seed pod in there comfortably. So I just want to take hold of this part here and just curve it a fraction. Okay, so that this will still fit in, but this looks like it's closing up a fraction. So that is your petal. Now, if we try and put that upright or sit it flat, it's going to change its shape. So to hold its shape, I'm just going to bend the wire. And again. So now, if I want to, I can perch it in a cup. This is a little bit shallow, but I can just sit that on the side of a cup so it will dry upside down. Or if you've got a piece of Oasis or polystyrene, then you can sit that on the side. I'll just bring my piece in slow so you can see. So I can now put this, which is upside down, into the side of my Oasis, making sure it's not touching the side, and that will dry in its shape now. Okay, if I hold that sideways, you'll see what I've done. All right. So a long demo, have a go if that's your okay, so for this cutter, you can jump for joy because it's easier. So what I'm going to do is actually roll the paste. Now you want to roll this out thin again. I can't emphasize the thickness enough. You really must have thin paste, because when you work with the cocktail stick, if you've got your paste is too thick, then you're going to end up tearing it with the cocktail stick. Okay, so super thin. We're talking phyllo pastry, not, it's thinner than a duck pancake. What's that? Spring roll, you know, the slimy spring rolls that you can get. Really, really super thin. Okay, feels like. Turn it over once you've rolled it out and cut out. Now if you made more than one center, then you cut out one of each of these shapes per flower. Okay, and because you're not putting any wires in these, if you've got the small set, not the large set, you can cut them all out in one go and then put it under a piece of plastic, like a little bag. Now I've got this little plastic folder here, which has got plastic sheets, but an A4 document folder would be absolutely fine. Okay, I'm just going to put my spare rolled out paste in there as well. Close that up. So I'm going to work on, I should work on your, if you've got this cutter and you're doing it all in one, you work on the funny M-shaped one first and put this one under plastic. Okay, so these are tiny, mine, but the process is the same. So poppy veiner, corn flour, drop your shape into the middle, press down. You don't have to worry about squidging this because you haven't got any wires in there. And once I've shown you this process, you'll be able to do all of your shapes, so you can speed away. So I'm just going to get my other one out so you can see how that's textured. This one I'm going to pop with the funny pimple shape facing down. Press into and remove. Okay. Now, the veining line, if you want, you can do that first before you start to frill because it's quite a small shape. So I'm putting it on here. You can put it on a foam pad, but I didn't put foam pad on the list, so I'll just use the back of my veiner, and we've just drawn a little central line in there. It's gone from here to here. And then we drop it onto the side of our little workboard. And you're working in the same way as I've just described with the cocktail stick. Make sure you've got corn flour, and if you find you get any paste stuck to your stick, then you need to just clean the stick off. So here we're doing the same process. Press, roll, move. Press, roll, move. Press, roll. And the cocktail stick is just pointing into the center all each time. So if you keep your cocktail stick in the same position and just move your shape. And if you're working on the other petal on the bigger set and you're having trouble, I will come back to you in a minute. Don't worry though, because last night we had the same problem. Okay, things stick in, and the first one looking like a pancake, and but they all managed it in the end, so you will too. Okay, so this is the second shape, the one that's M-shaped, and you can see I've just been a bit careful how I position my tool so that I can get in there without tearing anything. And just remember, you don't want to have too much of that cocktail stick in onto the flower because you're going to lose your texture, and also it won't frill. It's the fat end of that tool that's got to be on the edge to be able to frill. So now we've got our two shapes. I'm just going to show you how to stick this on because it's really quick and easy. You've made your tiny little pod. Take a little bit of glue, scrape the majority of the glue off onto the side of the pot, because for flowers you really don't need that much at all. Tiny little swish of glue on the M shape and to halfway on the big shape. And then your little seed pod will sit with the flat back face down onto the tiny little M shape. Technical term, squidge at the bottom. And then you put what you've just made down onto, lining up the base of the wire with the base of the pimple here, and pick up the back shape. And hey voila, you have a sweet pea. This is where everyone will start groaning, going, why didn't I have one of those? So they make great little small ones, but as big ones, because some of you have got the larger set of these, when I've said to you work on wiring the back petal, because of course it becomes much more fragile the bigger it is. So those two inner petals can be closed and the back petal can be curled back. Okay, and that is your little sweet pea, which would then be ready to colour and put a calyx on. So if you've got this cutter, you've got all the knowledge you need to complete your flowers, and you can crack on and make maybe 3 of them for me so that we can put them together in a nice little spray. Okay, so feel free to unmute and ask any questions. I'm happy to read anything that you would like to know about.
Hello, it's Sarah.
So 1.5 centimetres diameter of the white flower paste. And the idea is that we cut with this side petal, which is a kidney shape, and we'd cut one shape this way, and then we turn the cutter upside down and you cut another shape the other way. So it makes 2 different sides, a left and a right. Don't worry about which is left and right at the moment, we'll deal with that. And the wire itself is going to go up the middle. Okay, so I'm going to use a 28, and that is going to go up the center straight like this. So when you're rolling out, you just need to bear that in mind for your shape, because it's slightly bigger on this side. So I'll do one that way and turn over and do one the other way, and that makes the 2 side petals, and is all the flower. Okay, that's all the petals you're going to make. So warm your paste up, pop that onto your ridge, roll side to side so that you know you've got the width, then roll lengthways to get the paste nice and thin. It's really important to get good frills, you need thin paste. Okay, so I can see my ridge showing through. Carefully peel, sometimes it can stretch when you do that, so just do it gently. Bit of corn flour on the surface and a bit on the top of it sticky. And then we're going to take one shape this way. It looks like an alien's head, I think. So the fat end of the ridge is on this funny little squared off pimple part. Now, Kate, this morning, the cutters you've got, the pointy end is where the wire goes in. So you've got just a standard petal cutter there, for like a rose petal cutter. Okay, now this ridge here is not really big enough to push my wire in. If it was, all I'd need to do is turn the cutter over and cut my shape out. I've got a feeling that's not going to work. I'll give it a go. You really do need a thick ridge in the center, which will go when you press it into the veiner. Give it a good rub so you get a crisp cut and drop your shape out. So we've got 2, a left and a right, okay? If you forget that and you do 2 rights, it won't show anyway, so it doesn't matter. So now, as before, we're going to insert our wire. So this is familiar territory again. So I can do both of these, or you can put one under plastic, depending on how quickly you want to work. That's a real challenge to get my 28 gauge wire in there. That's the equivalent to Mary Claire putting a 24 in. You can see that that's tearing. Okay, so I will remake that second one in a bit. Take your poppy vein out. The ridge again is going to be the back. As this reads PP, this is the back. Ridge face down on the bottom part of the veiner. Make it so the wire is lined up in the center and vein. Carefully peel that off, because again, sometimes if it's stuck, just pulling can dislodge the wire. So now we've got our texture. And we're ready to drop it on the side of the board for the frilling. So some of you might be having trouble with the frilling. It's the fat end here. So this is all slightly narrower, and this is full fat here. That full fat part is placed on the edge. If you're further on, it's going to make it look funny. You'll get lines. And if you're too far off, you won't frill. So backwards and forwards, just quite a heavy pressure all the way round. So this makes it very tight frilled. I'll show it to you before I flare it, and then I'm going to show you the flaring again so you've got that bit. All the way around. Okay. Now, at the moment, although you've got tight frills, it's straight. And we want to have a bit of a curve to this. So on these, I'm just going to curve them backwards again. So this is the ridge, this is the back. You can tell because the vein lines are raised. The front, the vein lines are more recessed. Take hold in the middle and bend. So I'm just making it arc a little bit. Curve this bit in a fraction, just so it's not dead flat and awkward to get in, but not closed up, because you know you've got to position it around the seed pod. It's got to fit in there comfortably. And then the flaring out bit, which I think, Taryn, you're having a bit of trouble with, is just push up with your thumb and push down with your finger, but do it at the same time. It's like stretching the elastic on your knickers. Not that you do it like this, but that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to stretch the elastic. It's probably a very bad analogy. Okay, so that gives you this kind of wavy look, and you've already got a curve in there from the wire. When you do curve it, don't go near the wire end here, because that can make it poke through. I've just lost a bit of my closing up, so I'm just going to press at the back here a fraction to make this close up a little bit. Okay, see, it's a little bit closed up in there. You've just got to be a bit careful how much work you do anywhere near that wire, because it can tear. So you're going to make one that way and then turn the cutter over and make one the other. And apart from the calyx, once you've done these two side petals, we're ready to colour. Okay.
Anna.
So, hello.
It's Jill. I was having a problem frilling my petals as well, but I've realized I was doing it on the wrong board. I was doing it on the soft one. It should be done on the hard one.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, you can use the foam pad, but
It doesn't frill.
No, not with the cocktail stick. It won't. You're right. It's too soft. But if you prefer not to frill and you want to use your bone modeling tool, because you want to work on your foam pad, then instead of frilling with the cocktail stick, you can actually thin and frill with your bone modeling tool. And
yeah, it's not the same then.
It's not as good. It's not as frilly. Sometimes I actually do the thinning on here first with the bone modeling tool, and then I move my shape onto the board and do the cocktail stick. But you can bypass the foam pad process. Is it coming better now then, Jill?
Much better. I'll show you. This is the one I've just done on the hardboard.
Oh, yeah.
These are the ones I did.
Oh my goodness, huge difference.
Huge difference.
Oh, well done. Good, worked it out. That's good.
Yeah.
Yes, recording, perfect. I've got some pink in here. If you want the shades, I'm using the Sugar Flare colours, and I'm using, this one's a plum. I've got a lemon yellow, and I've got a moss green. Okay, but anything you fancy, because these come in a selection of colours from creams to greens, white. I like white, less work. Pink, purples, the lilacs, yellow as well. And if you want particularly dark colours, then you can pre-colour your paste with the shade you want and then enhance it with the dusting. So having moved everything out of the way so that it doesn't get all mucky, we can start with that back petal we made. Okay. So this is my back petal. And I'm going to start with my colour. I normally do the colour first so that I can control where I put the green, because what you don't want to do is combine the green with the colour, so because it will go brown. Apologies for the movement of chair then. So I'm just going to take some of my plum and start to work the colour from the edge in. So the important thing here is not to have too much on your brush. I'll just bring a tissue in here. You can actually work it into the brush a little bit more on a separate piece of tissue. I'm just using you know, normal tissues here, but you can use kitchen towel if you prefer. And we just work the colour onto the petal edge. Taking a little bit.
Are you using, did you add alcohol or water to the colours?
No, it's just dry colour. Dry petal dust, yeah, dry petal dust. When you're doing this, the idea is to catch the edge each time you draw the colour in, and that will end up giving you a nice crisp dark edge of colour and a blush onto the actual petal. And you just keep working. Once you get used to this, you'll know how much to be on your brush without it making a right old mess. The important thing you don't have is lots of loose petal dust on here, because when you pop it on your cake, if it is loose, then it's going to actually maybe taint your sugar paste on your cake. So that's just the start of it. And you can turn your shape over and do a little bit on the back. And when you do the same, catching from the outside edge in, you'll find that it will actually deepen the edge colouring even more from the front, which is really nice. It's a patience game. We don't need to colour these overly heavily today because of time, but yeah, you can do a lot to this. So once you've got your edging all the way around the front and back, you can finish it off with just a little bit of moss green mixed with lemon yellow. So this is like a lime shade. Just going to reset my focus there. There we go. So I'm just catching a little bit of the lime shade from the bottom up. And of course, it's nowhere near my pink, so it won't go brown. I use a different brush for the green, and I have one brush for colour and one brush for green. Then we can catch the base a little bit as well, give some interest to the back. And that colouring technique follows on to the side petals. So again, a little bit of green up the base of the side petal, on the back. You'll notice I've got my fingers supporting it as well, and do this as lightly as possible so you don't break off any of your petal edges. Catching the top edge with the pink. So do that to both sides. And your little seed pod, before that goes on with the pink, if you hold your brush sideways, you can run just a little bit of pink on that sharp edge. Don't know if you can see that well, but it does give it some interest. And a fraction of the green just from the base, just to follow it all through. I'm going to put a picture up of the finished piece in a minute so that you can see the colouring on there. But with your small ones, you just need to be a bit more careful where you go. So you can catch the edge of the seed pod, the edge of the petals, but of course it's all in one. So you just need to be careful where you put your colour, and the edge of the back petal. Do the back as well. And then you can come in with your lime shade at the back. Okay, so at the moment I haven't shown you calyx, but I will do in a minute. Okay, it's better to put the calyx on after you've coloured. I'll just share. This is the picture of the project so you can see. Okay, so just a bit of gooseberry green, that's all I've got here. And again, we'll put it on a ridge. In a minute, if anyone hasn't got a ridge board, I hope you haven't just sat there. I can talk you through how to deal with it if you haven't got a ridge board. Okay, so nice and thin. The green's a little bit harder to see through, but you do want it thin. Okay, and then we're going to use from either cutter. If you've got this set with the M, then use the back petal, or if your back petal's quite big, you could use this, because this section here would give you a leaf. This section here gives you a leaf. You could even cut it out freehand. This section here will give me a leaf, so this will give me a bigger leaf. Just line that up so it's roughly in the middle, because we're going to cut this bit off. Press down, pull the excess from around, and then with a pair of scissors or cutting wheel, you can just take that stuck out bit off. These don't have to be too evenly created. Now out of this paste as well, I'm just going to roll that a little bit thinner because the edge was quite thick. I'm just going to cut out one little calyx shape, okay, and show you how that goes on. So this is going to be cut. You've got to find something to poke it out because some of these are really super small. So just find something that will go in there to poke it out. And that piece I'm going to put under plastic. I'll come back to it in a minute. Okay, green's very dry. This shape here that we've just cut, or if you're using the other set, the smaller set, trim this bit off. Or if you're using the M, just use 1/2. Okay. Push in your 28 gauge wire. Make sure your wire end is nice and straight. Feed that through to about here. And then on your poppy veiner again, with the PP facing you, that's the back. This is the back because it's got the ridge. Face the ridge down onto the bottom. Press nice and firm to get your texture. And then if you flip that over to use the back of the veiner, or you can put it into your foam pad, onto your foam pad for this, just use the sharp end of your Dresden veining tool. Well, this is known as a petal leaf veining tool as well. Draw a line down the middle. Okay. Now, some of you have got a foam pad. I didn't put it on the list. If you've got a foam pad, you can just use your bone modeling tool to thin the edge a little bit. If not, with a bit of care, you can use the back of your veiner. Okay, does the same thing because it's got a bit of give in it. Just stay right on the edge. A little bit trickier on the veiner. Pinch at the base to close it up a little bit. And I want to curve it backwards like we did the petals, just to give it a bit more interest. They are very nondescript. I'll just share that photo with you again so you can see what I mean. There's not a lot to them, okay, but they're made in pairs and often grow opposite each other. While I'm here, I will also just show you how to make tendrils which are how the sweet pea latches on to wherever it's growing, because they're a bit of a, they're not really standalone. You need stems for them to grow on. So take a small strip of tape, stretch it, and start at one end, whichever end you want to twist. So twist it round itself until it feels tight. Keep the paste nice and stretched as you continue to stretch all the way along. Okay. You'll know when it's done, because if you continue to twizzle, it'll twizzle up on itself, which is something you don't want it to do. But if your tape's not stretched as you do this, then it'll look a bit loose and floppy. You can actually tape a wire into there if you want to. You can tape a wire and use that instead. And then I'm just using the back of a paintbrush and just tightly wind your tendril around the paintbrush. Ease that off, and that gives you your little tendril. Don't make it too long because it can flop. Okay, so I'll just give you a few moments to make a leaf, a star shape for your calyx, and a tendril, and I'll show you how to put it together after that. But feel free to unmute with it. So if you haven't got a ridge on your board, this is how you make it manually. There's a few ways, but this is the easiest way I find. So you start to roll your paste, but you keep it thick, so it's about 2 mil thick. And then you need to find something maybe like a paintbrush, a little bit of corn flour so it doesn't stick. Find the middle of your paste, press down firm and roll outwards. If it's sticking, you just need to hold on to it while you do it. Maybe a little bit more corn flour if it's really misbehaving. So the idea here is that you're thinning one side. Oops, this is nice and thin. And then if I turn it round and press, so I'm positioning here just maybe 2 mil away from where it steps up. So here's thin, there's a step up here and you've got thick paste. So just leave a gap so you've got some thick paste left, not too much. And then roll the other side. Okay, so you, in effect, you're creating the ridge. In the old days, I say old days, probably 15 years ago, they invented the ridges, which was an absolute genius moment because it meant you didn't have to mess about with making these ridges in the middle. And the ridges in the middle, they used to call them sleeping policemen, just like the humps in a road. And we used to have to make our own sleeping policemen because you couldn't get boards with ridges. And then some bright spark came up with the idea, and it was, well, all your birthdays come at once. Okay, so now I've got a thicker bit in the middle to insert my wire. Okay, and the process is the same then. Feed your 28 gauge wire through. So you can make that ridge as thick as you like, but just don't make it too wide because it ends up possibly distorting your shape as you put it through the veiner. It will squidge out more. Just trim that shape a little bit better. So the wire's gone in. And then you can vein. Okay, so that's how you make your own ridge. Okay, so the small all-in-one flowers, the calyx is quite straightforward and easy. Once you've coloured your flower, just take a little bit of glue and put some glue at the base here, just right at the bottom, not too much. Take hold of your calyx shape, pierce it through the centre and feed it up. Okay, and then technical squidge on. Just between your fingers, leave it for a few seconds. Make sure your fingers are dusted with corn flour so that the glue doesn't pull the shape back off. And that is simply just sits there, squidged on. Okay. So that's how to finish your small sweet pea. And once you've done your calyx on there, if you are working on the small sweet pea, do your calyx next. And put a bit of tape If you're not sure about taping, let me know in a minute, but I'll just show you the big one as well. So these need just a little twist of tape. Okay, so I've got 2 little sweet pea, 1 tendril, and a leaf, possibly a leaf. This one's quite big for this. I might put it on the other one. All right, so that's your your little sweet pea. To assemble the big one, it's quite straightforward. You've got 1 big back petal, 2 side, and your seed pod. Or you may have seed pod with this already stuck on, with just a back petal to go on. Okay, because you're all working with different cutters. So I'll just hook out my back petal, my seed pod, my left and my right flower shapes. It's quite handy. I've made two left ones by mistake, but the idea here is your cutter, that's this one here. Okay, so this part here that's more sticky out and leaning over will come at the top. So your other one like this, you want to have it on the opposite side. Okay, so it's more angled up. But look, I've got 2 the wrong way, 2 the same way. So I'm not going to panic because I can use them. So this is one of my side petals. I want to bend, very carefully bend it nice and tight to where the paste has just gone in. So do that on both of the side petals. And do the same on here, very gently. You can use tweezers, but sometimes it doesn't come very tight. If you're using tweezers, if you clamp at the top here and push back so it's tight. I don't want wire sticking out here. It needs to be tight. Take your seed pod, position it onto one of the side petals, but your twisted tape can be down here. All right, take your other, pop it onto there. So that's your 2 side petals. Everything's lined up tight here, but your taping is low at the moment. It's just so it's out of your way. So that's your 2 side petals gone on. Sharp edge faces forward. And now you can put your back petal on. So the back petal will sit in here nice and tight. And just to check before we tape, we can bring it up a little bit just to make sure it will sit in there nicely. Tape again. Okay, so now all my wires are in the same height. I can tape up the stem, or if you wanted to, you could stay where you are. So you can either tape all the way up to here, or now that tape is running all the same height. If I put my thumb there, just take all the shorter wires because I know they're the petals, and you can just move those down to your thumb. Be gentle because if your paste is a bit wet still, that could cause you a problem. And pull your seed pod into place last. Okay, so that's all my petals. And now my seed pod one is the longest wire. I can pull that one gently down. Try not to pull it too hard because it might shoot off. Okay, so now all my taping is up the top. Just give those another little tug. Straighten your wires and tape down. Okay, so if I'm looking at this now, the idea should look like that. Okay. To add the calyx to this now can be a bit of a challenge because of all these stems. So what you would do is take your little star shape Now, I've just realised that this one's dried. I would snip, this is going to break possibly, let's see, into the centre, just beyond the centre, because you can't feed it up. It's broken. That doesn't matter, because once you're done, you put your glue in. I've just got to pull that wire because it's a little bit loose. There we are. Just tighten that in. That's better. Okay. I felt like it was a little bit too far. This shape, you can cut it. The idea was just to snip it so you could just literally slot it on like a peg. But if I glue the back of this now, I can just pop those sepals on. Okay, and you put these, it's broken up, but you put these, the other ones in the front there. Okay, and that gives you your same effect with the calyx as the small flower. I'll just show you, because this one could have a second flower on it, but I'll just show you how these would perhaps go together, and then you can choose to stay if you'd like to complete yours. But with these, you can stagger them, so you can have one slightly higher than the other. There may be something like this. And you can add in your twizzle, which will look really pretty. Give it a little tape. And then if you wanted to, you could add in a couple of leaves. Okay, so we'll do that. The leaves don't need to be this big. They're graduated in size as the plant matures. Take that down. So that's the little one with 2 flowers on it. And you've got your big one. If you wanted to, you could combine those. I hook out my second sweet pea. I'd want a bit of distance on here. So I'll just take one stem down a little way. And because you've got the thick wire in the bit that's holding the seed pod, it should hold itself. It shouldn't start to droop. So we can pop a tendril in there. Maybe bend your stem a little bit so that you can get the other flower in there without them crashing. Tape down. I'll show you these and then I'll show you the picture. We're overrunning a little bit. I'm happy to stay, but I appreciate that everyone's got other things that they need to do. So the video will come out to you if you're not quite there and you need to leave. Okay, so that's your big flower. And you can tell, I mean, they're beautiful. They're both beautiful for different reasons. 2 flowers for the price of 1. Bargain. Okay. Okay, so this is a picture of the completed spray, and you can see I've got 2 leaves that are positioned opposite each other, and the tendrils I've attached to the top. So these 2 tendril pieces here would have been attached to a 28 gauge wire, then the leaves, and that would complete that stem. And you can add as many leaves and as many flowers as you like into your stem. So I hope you've enjoyed the workshop, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to get in touch. Otherwise, I hope to see you again very soon. Bye for now.